Welcome back. Takano-san reached into a paper bag that she'd been holding the whole time, took out a worn scrapbook, and began to flip through it. Then just for you, Keiichi-kun, I'll tell you an old story. Yes, story time. It's a common tale in this region. If you go to the library, it would even be on their recommended reading list. Telling stories in such a dark, creepy place. She must have a horror story in mind. Shion's face belied nothing but calm. If she had the same personality as Mion, she'd have found fault with me being scared. I'll endure it for now and pretend to be calm. Okay? Alright, I'll read it. After confirming that I was going to be quiet and listen, she began to speak softly, like a kindergarten teacher reading a picture book. Long, long ago, in a certain village in the mountains, there was a swamp. This swamp was very, very deep. Some even called it bottomless. People said it was connected to hell, the land of demons. The rumors said that it was deeper than the ocean, and that anyone it swallowed would sink into the underworld, a bottomless swamp. Its name was Onigafuchi. Wait, I thought back to the story I heard yesterday about the sacrifices sinking into the bottomless swamp. Could that be the swamp she's talking about? So then the village was Hinamizawa, right? You catch on quickly. That's right. Though it was called Onigafuchi Village at the time. Onigafuchi Village. That's a pretty inauspicious name. It evokes quite the image, doesn't it? I hear that the name was changed in the Meiji period. The name of the swamp connected to hell was called Onigafuchi, which meant the demon's abyss. And the true name of this village, Hinamizawa, was Onigafuchi Village. The villagers belonged to that abyss, or to hell, in other words. They lived their lives worshipping the swamp said to connect to it. But then one day, demons began to appear one after the other from deep in the swamp. The villagers feared that hell was overflowing. The demons mercilessly attacked the villagers. They could only watch in fear. They could do no more than hide themselves and tremble. So, did someone exterminate them? Unfortunately, there is no Momotaro or Superman in this fairy tale. Then, did they get the whole village together to fight them? Heavens no. The villagers weren't nearly strong enough to fight on equal terms with the demons. Then, the only recourse would be to flee the village. They couldn't do that either. To the villagers, it was their beloved homeland. It didn't matter how terrifying the demons, they wouldn't have run away so easily. Then, what did they do? Wouldn't they just get wiped out? Unable to fight and unable to run, all they could do was wait for the village to be destroyed. Then, when everyone had lost hope, their god, Oyashiro-sama, descended unto them. I see. So Oyashiro-sama came down from the sky and beat up all the demons then. You're such a boy, Kei-chan. You always jump straight to using force to resolve things. Shion sighed, a little annoyed. Embarrassed, I held my tongue. The thing about Oyashiro-sama, he wasn't a violent god who would beat them up like you're saying. He was a kind god, filled with love and benevolence. The strength of Oyashiro-sama descended from the heavens couldn't be compared to that of the demons. They didn't even fight. They simply prostrated themselves before his radiant authority. Oyashiro-sama urged them to go back to hell from whence they came, but the demons wept and challenged him, saying they could never return. The world of the demons, too, has harsh commandments. They claimed they had been banished from hell. Demons who didn't have a place to go, either in hell or in the human world. Of course, they were at fault for attacking the village. They deeply reflected on it and were sorry. As the villagers conversed amongst themselves, little by little they came to pity the demons, and after talking with everyone in the village, they decided to live alongside them. A lot of fairy tales have them being exterminated or driven away, but you don't often hear one where they live in peace. You're right. Demons are supposed to symbolize all evils. A story where they decide to live together with humans is certainly strange. When the demons first heard the villagers' invitation, they doubted their ears, but soon burst into tears of joy. The villagers had given them a place to live. It was said that in payment for this good deed, the demons shared their many kinds of power and secrets with the villagers. Oyashiro-sama was very pleased with this happy exchange. He gave the demons the bodies of humans so they would be indistinguishable from the villagers. He himself decided to stay on the surface and watch over the everlasting peace between them. A land in which man, demon, and god lived together. I had thought the word demon was a noun meaning evil that needs to be exterminated. A god may have mediated for them, but you don't often hear happy endings like that where both sides live in harmony. I see. I guess it is kind of interesting. Although the normal fairy tale ends there, it was revised quite a bit during the Edo period into a much longer story. After that, the humans and demons intermixed, and eventually there was no difference between them. So the demons ended up disappearing? No, not at all. Half of them stayed just as they were. The knowledge the villagers had received from the demons basically made them into something inhuman, what people call transcendent. They were well aware the power they had was heresy, and as those below worshipped them, they lived out their lives in secrecy. This story is the root of many derivative tales and pieces of fiction. It's the foundation, I mean. The basis. What do you mean by root? She means the part about the villagers having demon blood. What I mean is, all of the legends from around here are based on the premise that the villagers are descended from demons. There was a hint of amusement in Shion's face as she said that. It was like she wanted to say that she, too, had demon blood in her. Is there any proof, though? Maybe it's somehow rooted in historical fact beyond just fairy tales. Oh, Mayabara-kun, then do you believe that demons really did come out of the swamp and breed with humans? Well, it's not that I don't believe it, but when she said demon, she meant the ones from hell, but in ancient Japan, the word wasn't necessarily used to denote only that kind, right? The more well-known use involves the drifting foreigner theory. As the story goes, Westerners who were shipwrecked in nearby seas had such markedly different customs that they were called demons. Japanese people were relatively similar in appearance to other Asians, but everything about those from the West was different. Their physiques, their faces, and their skin color. In Japan, terms like red demon and blue demon evoke images especially of Westerners. Lacking in skin pigments, Westerners would sunburn easily and turn red. Being fair-skinned, I think blood vessels appearing on their skin would look blue too. A handful of accidental aliens would drift into Japan and come under persecution, being called demons. They would flee into the mountains to survive, turn into bandit groups, and attack villages for food and the like. How does that explanation sound? Maybe it's a bit childish. Takano gave me a weird smile when, having come up with such an impromptu hypothesis, I can read the word, but I can't get the words out, like the sounds out. I unconsciously followed it up with self-deprecation. I can't read today. Still, she didn't smile as if to make fun of me. It's not ridiculous. There are a lot of people who subscribe to the drifting foreigner theory. Even so, nobody actually knows what happened. Were they groups of foreigners who had turned to banditry, or were they really demons who had come from the bottom of the world? Then, Takano-san, which one do you believe? The truth of the matter aside, I'd rather believe the more fantastic explanation. It's more fun that way, isn't it? Her answer made her sound a wee bit like a romanticist. Here I'd thought she'd reject unrealistic stories like that. Now then, this is where the fun begins. Takano-san brought an end to her storytelling and waits for a moment as if to tantalize us. Suddenly, Shion looked around as if something had caught her eye. Her head bobbed to and fro like she was making sure nothing had changed. What's wrong, Shion? I'm sorry. Please don't worry about it. Shion pretended as though nothing had happened. Takano-san had made sure nothing had happened. Also made sure nothing had happened, then cleared her throat and broached the next subject. I explained that half of the villagers have demon blood. That blood, they actually say that it's the blood of the kind of demon that eats people. Man-eating demons? That escalated quickly. That blood still runs through the villagers' veins. They say that sometimes the blood awakens from its slumber. I thought the fairy tale had a happy ending, with the humans and demons living in peace, but it began to suddenly change into a brutal, bloody story. Well, they eat people. They say that every decade or so, they can't help but want to feast on human flesh. The villagers can't eat other villagers. So when this happens, it's said they descended on the human villagers and conducted Oni-kakushi. What's an Oni-kakushi? Broadly speaking, it's when a demon kidnaps someone, when a person is demoned away. They say that the villagers of Onigafuchi would overwhelm unfortunate human villagers in order to kidnap sacrifices. Takano-san's explanation was plain and simple, but when I imagined what it must have been like, it was terrifying. They lose their human reason. The villagers turn into real demons. They attack the villagers they loathe in a dirty world of the masses below. And then they kill and eat their sacrifices. So they're no different from demons after all. What did Oyashiro-sama do? Wasn't he supposed to be staying in the village and watching over them? Oyashiro-sama knew about it, of course. Oni-kakushi isn't indiscriminate. The villagers apparently never kidnapped anyone other than the sacrifices decided upon by their god. In the texts, it's usually 1 or 2 people. A village inhabited by those both human and inhuman. It was like the heartwarming episode's colours had inverted, like negative film, revealing the painful and ugly truth. So, on the nights when they raided villages, they would feast on their kidnapped sacrifices, which is why the nights came to be known as Watanagashi. Watanagashi. Tonight's festival was Watanagashi. I just couldn't reconcile the fun festival with the horrible tale Takano-san was telling me. Watanagashi. Well, wasn't it about giving thanks to the futons we use over the winter or something? Kei-chan, Wata has another meaning, you know. It means entrails. Shion, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Entrails? Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Like fish guts. Wait, what? Like a jigsaw puzzle, the fun times I had today and Takano-san's grotesque tale clicked together in my mind. Watanagashi, so gut spilling. I didn't think saying that could ever feel so nauseating. Yes, it's as you imagine, Mayabara-kun. Right now, the Watanagashi festival might just be a somewhat early summer festival occurring every June, but it used to be different. It used to be a ghastly, cannibalistic feast held on the night the villagers had collected their unfortunate dinner. That can't be true. I had no real reason to say that, but I couldn't help it. Mayabara-kun, you said that Watanagashi is a ritual about purifying futons, right? What do you think the futons filled with cotton, with wata, represent? Futons are futons. They're beds. They're things for sleeping in. What else could they possibly represent? I was rattling on, desperately attempting to deny the horrible festival that Takano-san was describing. Deep down, however, I found myself understanding all too well what she meant. Futons, stuffed with cotton. If the cotton represented entrails in both pronunciation and meaning, then entrail-filled futons would have to be humans. Why don't you think back to the offertory dance Rika-chan performed? Do you know what she was doing up there? No, I don't. I didn't even watch the whole thing anyway. Shh, Kei-chan, you're getting too worked up. Shion grabbed one of my ears, reminding me that this wasn't somewhere I should raise my voice. Even so, I still can't suppress this agitation I feel. Rika-chan was carrying a festival hoe. You've probably realized it already, but that's not a hoe for plowing fields. Stop talking about your mom like that. It's a tool for dissecting human bodies. I didn't see the dance all the way through, so I don't know what kind of performance Rika-chan was putting on after I'd left. When I told this to Takano-san, she kindly explained Rika-chan's dance to me. To summarize what she said, after what I'd seen, Rika-chan would pierce the futons with that hoe, cut them open, and pull out the cotton inside. She'd cut the cotton out, one bit at a time, and set it afloat. That's the kind of ritual it was. Broadly speaking, it was quite the bombastic ceremony where they'd rip out the guts and throw them into a basin. And then the ritual was over. It's thought that afterwards the villagers, each with a different role, dismantled the flesh piece by piece and feasted upon it. Hee hee. At Takano-san's strangely happy giggle, I felt for some reason violent displeasure. Rika-chan, every day during our lunch break, she'd take a rice-pounding mallet into the schoolyard, and she'd work so hard, sweating bullets, to practice for the offertory dance she had done today. All that effort, all that work, Takano-san disgraced it. Even though she worked so hard to practice for today. Takano-san, I think you should choose your words more carefully. Kei-chan's pretty naive, so please don't tease him so much. A moment before I opened my mouth to express how angry I was, Shion stopped me. Shion must have been fully aware of how that story made me feel. I'm sorry. I thought you'd like a story with that sort of shock value since you're a boy. Takano-san spoke without a hint of malice as she smiled gracefully. After hearing all that, did you figure out what kind of stuff is in this storehouse, Kei-chan? See? Look. Shion pointed out one of the walls vaguely illuminated by the lantern's light. There was. Mere moments ago, they hadn't held my interest. They were just boring-looking tools lined up on the shelves. Ugh. All those uninteresting tools that I didn't understand how to use, they all suddenly took on a new meaning, and I couldn't help but let out a groan. At first, they had looked like carpentry tools, like chisels or planes. However, when I thought back, I'd seen pictures of these sorts of tools before. Yeah, they came up in a Japanese history textbook. Yes, on the page introducing the Kaitai Shinsho, or the new text on anatomy. These sorts of things, They're printed realistically in the literature of Germany, capital of the medical world. These aren't carpentry tools. These strangely shaped tools, they're for dissection. Everyone knows that in the Edo period, they would dissect the corpses of those who had been put to death in order to gain knowledge about Western medical techniques. Illustrations of the dissection tools they used at the time came up in textbook supplements. The things hung up on this wall all looked exactly the same as those. If you want a scarier way of looking at it, think of them as cooking utensils. That's gross. Yeah, I love her laugh. Takano-san, holding the lantern, the only light source in the room, led us along the wall. She had the only light, so I had to walk after her whether I liked it or not. Look. Takano-san illuminated a coiled chain which left a bigger impression than the other things we saw. The chain in itself was nothing unusual, but further along it were metal fetters that were, like hinges, clearly meant for binding people. Kei-chan, look at that! Shion tapped me on the shoulder and pointed to a restraining table that was clearly shaped like a person. My spine froze. Why your spine? My blood felt like it was turning into sherbet. What? As it crawled up my back. That is the strangest description I have ever seen. My blood felt like it was turning into sherbet. Okay. Yeah. On each of the joints, there were things like chains and iron balls attached. It was like the table was searching for its next sacrifice, ready to spread their arms wide and close them in. It's probably a chopping block. I think you'd strap the sacrifice down to prep them for eating. Delicious. The words chopping block sent a jolt through my body. When I looked more closely, there were many dark slices carved into it as though from a knife or a saw. They were the most clear-cut signs of usage you could ask for. It proved these tools weren't just for show, they were used for their original purpose. If someone was strapped tightly onto this table, they probably wouldn't be able to move even a muscle. Their guts would be defenseless. You'd take one of those eerie cooking knives lined up over there, stab them with it, and then you'd slice open their belly and dissect them. I'd heard the stories, but this is incredible. Before coming in here, Shion had mentioned she had a good guess of what was inside, but it seems to have exceeded her imagination. There's still more. How about it? More fascinating than a wax museum, isn't it? Takano-san had this happy expression like she was visiting a toy store for the first time. I don't get it. This Mio Takano person has nerves of steel. Are these bizarre, grotesque objects that fascinating to her? I, for one, was not enjoying myself. I'll be frank, this was all too weird for me. Still, there was something even more horrifying than all this. That would be none other than Takano-san herself. Takano-san holding the lantern giving off such a thin beam of light. If she suddenly turned it off, then what would I do when, the next moment, everything went totally dark? That's why I was scared. Takano-san had the only light, and anyway, I was scared. At some point, Shion had started holding onto my shirt sleeve. It was a little annoying to walk like that, but I didn't shake her off. That minor sensation allowed me to feel the presence of an ally here and now. Before we had even walked halfway through the storehouse, the air I felt on my skin changed completely. These cruel tools lined up, all crammed together in this place. Some were horrible ones made to take away sacrifices' freedom, and some were tools made to efficiently disassemble and prepare the bodies for consumption. Those were just the things I understood. There were plenty of other strange-looking objects that I couldn't even guess the purpose of. Now that I was here, I didn't have the slightest desire to hear the details about what sort of terrifying reasons they were meant to be used for. At the very least, they were all completely different from the sort of clean, simple killing function of a katana. Tools to kill people were obviously constructed in such a way that they could kill people. Yes. If that was the goal, then the person you used them on would obviously end up dead. The kinds of tools here, however, were different. The tools that were here were for cutting people, for crushing them, for boiling them and cooking them, and for grinding them. They were tools of torture. They weren't made to kill people. People dying was just an incidental result. Actually, they might not even kill them. If the sacrifices could die during such a horrifying ritual process, that would be nice, but they don't even die in the end. They remain in a state of hellish pain. Perhaps they were only being allowed to live. Only now, in this moment, did I fully realize just how terrifying and fearsome that difference was. People, you see, most of these wouldn't kill them if used properly. Takano-san, as if reading my mind, displayed a shocking smile. Burning at the stake, the famous method of execution for witches, will kill the person immediately. When the body suffers extreme burns on the skin all over, the decomposition of the skin's chemical makeup produces poison-like symptoms and causes an immense shock to the victim. Though I suppose it's still very cruel, compared to the guillotine, you have to wait far longer for that to happen. She described such horrors in a strangely medical way. Shion immediately answered the question I had. Takano-san is a nurse. There's a saying that nothing can scare a doctor. I guess it's true. Oh, and also, there was a method of execution in ancient Rome where they would grill the person. Just like a barbecue. Delicious. What? They would cover the person in wire netting, ew, and slowly cook them over a charcoal fire. No thank you. To think the memories of when I went to a day camp with my family would come rushing back now of all times, so vividly. Delicious torture. That's what it was like. Apparently, they wouldn't die too easily for some reason. According to one source, even if they roasted one side of a person to a crisp for an entire night, they would still be conscious and able to speak fluently. That's terrible. What? That's insane. You'd grill someone the whole day. Why are we talking about this like cooking? And they'd still be conscious. That's terrible. It's said that ancient Rome, famous for their executions, thought of plenty of ways to execute someone while having the victim stay alive as long as possible. Among them, there was one method where they would open the gut, pull out the intestines like sausages, pull them up with a winch and put them on public display. Yes. Shion was behind me, clinging to me. Not just because she was scared, she was protecting her stomach. You would think someone with their intestines pulled out would die instantly, right? Actually, as long as you do it tenderly and thoroughly, it's apparently possible to pull them all out while the person is still conscious. Thanks, I needed to know that. That's great information to have. I felt a sick feeling in my stomach. It was like my organs were coiling up just from Takano-san's stare. Though pulling them out with a winch was a rather exaggerated method. In a more barbaric way, they might slice open the gut and then cut the intestines out and throw them everywhere. It's quite imaginable that they did dreadful things like that too, isn't it? However, those being put to death are conscious. It must be far more terrifying than painful. She spoke with pleasure, as if she had come here on a sightseeing trip. I heard Shion gulping multiple times near my ears. Perhaps Hinamizawa, or rather Onigahuchi village, did something like that for the Watanagashi festival. Listen, if you try hard, can't you hear it? I wanted nothing more than to not hear anything at all. So why only at times like these do I begin to hear things I shouldn't be able to? All right, we're going to end this episode here. That was certainly a vivid episode. Not quite sure how I felt about all of that, but here we are. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of the village's curse and demons, cooking skills. Come back again next week and let's find out a little more of what's going on. I'll see you guys then. See ya.